So I want to kind of share a little bit of my story with you guys as I get into the text, and in that way, like, you guys can kind of see who I am and what God's done in my life, and I hope that that's an encouragement to you. But first, I want to share with you guys a quote, and I've been thinking about this idea of identity, and it just so happens that my parents, back home in Maryland, where I grew up, were reading a book about identity with their small group. So I was talking to them, and they're like, oh, I have this really great quote I want to share with you guys. So it goes like this: everything that is false about us arises from our belief that our deepest happiness will come from living life our way. And isn't that so true? Like, when you boil it down, we're all sitting here. I'm standing, you guys are sitting. And you're all kind of, the way that you're living your life, you're trying to be happy, right? I mean, nobody's trying to be miserable. We all kind of want to be happy. I have a story to share with you guys. When I was in high school, I got into drugs and partying really bad. I was like selling drugs, all that terrible stuff. And I ended up going through a rehab program. I got sent up to upstate New York one morning, like woke up for school, and my dad was like, hey, you're not going to school today. Just go ahead and pack a suitcase. You're going to New York. And I was like, yeah, that can't be good. And so I went up there, and for 7 weeks, I backpacked in like 2 feet of snow in like 10 degrees, set up a little camp for myself. Like, you didn't get a tent. Like, you guys think of camping. I don't know what people over here think about camping. Over in Maryland, at least, people say they're going camping, and then they like drive their RV 5 miles and park somewhere and like plug in. That's probably what people do here. But camping in upstate New York is like, you don't have a tent, you get a tarp, and you get a sleeping bag. And then you set up the tarp, and you try not to get wet and cold. And it doesn't work out very well. You end up very cold and very wet, and it's awful. So I'm at this place, and I'm in a group of like 15-ish guys that are all dealing with the same sort of stuff I'm dealing with. They're all like living in complete rebellion, just like acting terrible to their parents, drugs, alcohol, partying, anything you can imagine that's terrible. I've probably done it. And I ended up there. I'm sitting around at this group with all these guys, and our counselors are kind of fostering this discussion between us. And they're like, if you could boil down like what you want out of life to just like one thing, like, what do you guys want? And as it went around the circle, I kid you not, we all said the exact same thing. And it wasn't, I want to like go party real hard, I want to do a bunch of drugs. It was, I just want to be happy. Every single one of us. But it's so crazy now to look back and think like, okay, I wanted to be happy, but then I was making these decisions that were like putting me in the complete opposite direction of happy. Like, I was actually just miserable. And so were all these other guys that I was with. And so there's a critical question that you guys have to ask yourselves if you want to be happy. One question. Just kidding. 2 questions. Well, it's like 2 parts to one question. And the question comes with a story. So you guys know who Jesus is? Yeah? There's like not enough hands raised in here. That's embarrassing. Do you guys know that, like, do you guys know what a rabbi is? Anybody know that word? Rabbi? Like a what? No, say it. No, she's not going to say it. It's okay. She said, is that like a something, dude? And yeah, it's like that. So a rabbi was a really great teacher. Picture like me or Chris, but way, way older, with a sweet beard, and had the entire Old Testament memorized. So yeah, you know, we're on our way. We're getting there. Rabbis were brilliant, and they were renowned for their parables, and you guys like can start putting 2 and 2 together, right? Because Jesus told a lot of parables. Interesting. He was a good rabbi. So there's this other great rabbi at the same time as Jesus, and his name was Rabbi Akiva, and he told this story, or people told this story about him, and it goes like this. And this is where the question comes in. So Rabbi Akiva's getting kind of old, probably like 70s, 80s, can't see that well. He goes into town to get supplies. It's kind of getting dark out. And at a fork in the road, he ends up going the wrong direction. And it's like pitch black. He's walking down this path, and without realizing it, he stumbles into a Roman garrison where all the Roman guards are. And the Romans were occupying Israel at this time and oppressing the people. So they weren't really the type of people that you wanted to kind of like stumble into their camp in the middle of the night. But Akiva does. He stumbles into the middle of their camp. And a Roman soldier calls out into the night, and he says, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" And I'm like, dude, if I'm Akiva, like, I've wet my pants now, I'm crying, I'm running home. But he's a rabbi, so he probably doesn't do that. And he's like, he hears these questions, he hears this dude yell out in the night, and he just sits there and he thinks for a minute, like rabbis do, they think. And then he calls back to the guy, and he says, "How much do you get paid to stand there and ask me, who am I and what am I doing here?" Which is kind of a bold question. Like, I'm expecting a sword to come out of the night and like stab him or something. But the Roman guard calls back and he says, 5 denarius a day, which means a lot to you guys because you know all about denarius and exchange rates. I don't either. A normal pay, who knows? So Rabbi Akiva thinks for another minute and he goes, "I'll pay you twice that to stand outside of my house and ask me those 2 questions every morning." And it's so interesting that one of the wisest dudes ever, great teacher, boiled life down to those 2 questions. If he could be reminded of those 2 questions, who was he and what is he doing? Like, what's his purpose? What's he here for? If he could be reminded of those 2 things every single day, what would that change? If you guys could be reminded every single day, if I could be reminded, who am I and what am I doing here? Like, would I live my life any differently? And I never really addressed that question seriously. In my life, I just kind of like, I don't know, I want to be happy. And I just kind of like floated along making these decisions that I thought would make me happy. And what ends up happening when you do that is you find things that make you happy for about 15 minutes. And then you're on to the next thing. And you think that thing will make you happy. And it does for a little bit. I don't know if you guys know this or have like put this together yet. You probably have. Like, sin makes you happy. That's why it works. Like, that's why we're tempted to sin. But the happiness only lasts like 15 minutes. And then you feel real miserable. But then we keep making these decisions that go back to sin. And we end up in this like terrible cycle. And that's exactly what happened to me. So the question is, who are you and what are you doing here? And I'm going to propose to you guys that you have 2 options with that question. Somebody's got to answer it. So either you can answer it, which is what I tried to do, or you can let God answer that question. You can let God answer the question of who am I and what am I here to do? I chose not to let God answer that question. I knew who he was. I knew Jesus. I knew what he did for me, all of that stuff. I believed it right up in here. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. He died on a cross. It's great. But it never really impacted my life. I didn't let God answer that question. And I didn't let God answer that question for primarily 2 reasons. And they both kind of fall under the idea that I just didn't trust God. Like, I didn't think God was good. I knew a whole lot about God, but I didn't understand a lot about God. So when I was in probably like 4th, 5th grade, I have an older brother. His name's Will, a couple years older than me. Always looked up to him like you do when you have an older brother, older sister. And when I was in like 4th or 5th grade, he got really depressed. My brother had terrible ADD. He was awful at sports, never good at anything. He was terrible in school, bad at sports. So when you're in middle school or high school, you're either good at school or you're good at sports. Like, that's kind of how things got divided up, at least where I went to school. You got like your sports kids, and then you got like your kind of nerdy kids. It's cool. And so my brother was terrible at all these things. Didn't have a lot of friends. Ends up super depressed. Ends up going to the hospital, suicide watch, all of that stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah, like, God must not be a very great guy. Like, if all this stuff is happening, then like, where's God? And does he care about me? And a year after that, my best friend at the time, his mom got cancer, and she battled it for a year and a half. It was really gnarly. They were really involved in church. My family was really involved in church. You've got like hundreds of people having prayer meetings and like praying over this lady for healing. And like, I truly believe that God heals people because I've seen it. But she didn't get healed, like she died. And I was so sure that God was gonna heal her because I knew he could. And I couldn't understand why he would let someone die. Especially a mom who has 2 kids and a husband who now has to work and be a single father halfway through their life. All the life they built together was just like shattered. So I didn't trust God. I thought, like, dude, if that's what you let happen, if that's the kind of thing that you let go on, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm gonna go find my happiness somewhere else. And so the second part of that quote that I shared with you goes like this. The author goes on and says, deep down, we doubt that God is really capable of securing our happiness. And isn't that so true? Like, if you really thought that doing things God's way would make you happy, well, you'd do it, right? Because we all want to be happy. So either you believe it or you don't. Either you believe that God's way is going to bring you that full, abundant life that he talks about. People dropping chairs. Come on. Amateur hour on the upstairs deck. Ooh, can't touch it with the wedding ring. It's loud. I lost my train of thought. So, deep down, we doubt that God is really capable of securing our happiness. And I totally doubted that. Like, I'm type A for that. I thought, okay, well, maybe he's capable of it, but he certainly isn't interested in securing my happiness. He doesn't really care about me. Look at all the people on the planet, and I'm thinking, like, dude, there's no way that he's interested in this one person. So I did what you do. I turned to drugs, turned to alcohol, partying, relationships with girls, all of the above, you name it, I did it. And I thought, like, dude, this stuff will really make me happy. I thought if I placed my identity and who I was in that whole lifestyle, well, then at least people would know me. Like, at least somebody would care about me. And what was so sad is, like, towards the end of my struggle with drugs, I looked around me at all the friends that I had made, like all the people that I partied with, and I realized, like, if something happened to me, like, none of those people were going to be around. Like, none of those people had my back. And if you guys are in that situation, because I know some of you here are, and if you're that person like me, I was on the outside looking in. Like, I would come to church, and I'd be like, I don't really want to hang out with these people. Like, I want to go party. And then I would go out, I would go party, and end up drunk, passed out on the side of the road, and like, nobody drove me home. Like, nobody was there for me. And then eventually when things turned around and I got involved in church and like bad things started happening, because like you guys know this, once you start following Jesus, like life's still hard. But at least you have a community of faith around you. At least you have hope in Jesus. At least you have hope in the people that care about you, like for real. When the people in that old lifestyle, man, like everybody's out for themselves. Eventually, with all the drugs and all the alcohol, it starts to take a toll on your brain. So I started to get super duper depressed. And I started thinking like, dude, life kind of sucks. Like, I've made some pretty poor decisions, and I've gone really, really far down this path, and there's no way I can get out. And I knew all the Jesus stuff, I knew all the church stuff, and I just kept it at an arm's distance. I wasn't interested, because I didn't get it. I didn't think it would really change my life. I just thought it was another cool thing that you believe, and then you go home and you live a life like everyone else. But that's not what it is. I just didn't get it yet. But I got so depressed that I ended up trying to commit suicide. And like, suicide's a funny thing because, well, it's not really funny. That's a terrible way to say it. But it's one of those things that, like, when you're the person that's hurting so bad, when you're the person that's so depressed and so unhappy, like, you're almost like too scared to do it. Because, you know, a lot of people say like, oh, suicide is like a cry for help. And I'm thinking, yeah, like if I killed myself and people were really upset, I would have wished that I lived and I could meet those people. Because like when I was living that life, I didn't have any of those people around me. No, like it didn't seem like anybody cared. And then a lot of times after a suicide, people come out of the woodworks and they're like, man, I didn't even know. And it kind of comes back to that idea of sharing your testimony, sharing who you are with people. Like if you guys don't have people that you can be real with, then you're in for a lot of heartache. Like nobody wants to travel that route alone. And I'm telling you guys that here at United, like you have a place where people care about you. The people here and your leaders and Chris, they care about you guys so much, and they don't want you to suffer in silence. They want you to bring that stuff into the light, offer that stuff up to Jesus, pray with people, get healing. Because, man, even though my friend's mom died and people have died since then, I still believe in healing. So I end up trying to commit suicide. Doesn't work. Then I try again. It doesn't work that time either. And then I'm thinking like, dude, I've got to be the biggest failure in the world because now I can't even like succeed at killing myself. Like this should be easy. And so I try a third time. So I track down a bunch of drugs. And of 5 different kinds of drugs, I took, of each one, enough to kill a person twice my weight. So what's that, like 10, 20? Like it should have done the job. And honestly, I wanted to die. I was so miserable. I can't even like capture for you guys what that feels like. The only people here that know what that feels like are the people that have been through it. And hey, like he said in the video, like there's people that have been through the stuff you're going through. There's people that want to walk through that with you instead of just letting it all happen. Guys, what I love so much about God, maybe more than anything else, this might be my favorite thing about God. He doesn't define us by our past mistakes. Of all the terrible, terrible things that I did to myself and to the people around me when I was living completely selfishly, God like wipes the slate clean if you want to. And he doesn't define you. Who you are isn't dependent on those past mistakes that you've made. But guys, out in the world, and you know this because you guys are in schools where, man, if you mess up once, like, dude, that's your identity. Day one. Like, if you're the kid that, like, first day of high school is, like, walking through the cafeteria and, like, trips and chucks the lunch tray across the room, I'm sorry, but you're lunch tray kid for, like, 4 years and maybe 5 if you're not doing that well in school. It's okay. College is taking me, like, five so far and, like, probably, like, 3 more. So it's all right. I'm with you. But, guys, out in the world, like, you're not going to find that grace. You end up getting these labels put on you. And these things that people want to identify you as based on things that you've done, things that have been done to you, past mistakes, all of that stuff. Guys, like, that's not what happens here. That's not what happens in Jesus' name. God gives us the option if we want it. to be defined by Jesus. I don't know if you guys get that. Like, all the terrible, terrible things that you've done. All the terrible things that I've done. All the things that you're ashamed about, that you'd never admit to anyone. You wouldn't even tell your best friend. All those things, like God sees them. I don't know if you guys know that. That's like a really scary thought. I try not to think about that very often because I mess up all the time. But I can't escape the fact that God sees it all. The Bible says that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. You guys, that's so true. That's so true. Guys, when I was completely alone and broken, trying to kill myself, I sent a couple text messages out to a couple of friends, and I was like, hey, I don't know, what do you say in those moments? Like, hey, won't be at school tomorrow. Not going to probably see you for a little bit. So I texted a couple of people. Truthfully, I really had like 2 people in my life that were even like worth texting, that would even care. And then I, took a bunch of drugs, left my phone at the house, walked out the door, and I thought like, dude, like this is it. I made it like to the end of my driveway, and at the end of my driveway, there's like, I don't know if you guys have these on your driveway, but there's like a drainage like tunnel thing underneath it, We had like one of those little things, and there's like a ditch on the side of the road to get all the water, all that stuff. So I get to the end of my driveway. I can barely walk. I can't really keep my eyes open. They're like totally all out. And if I can open my eyes, I open them, and then my eyes like just cross-eyed. And then I'm like starting to fade. My heartbeat was like 1 second through the roof. And then like the very next second, it was like barely even beating. And it was like this like wave of anxiety came over me where I realized like this is the moment, like I'm gonna die, like this is it. I don't have to deal with life anymore. I don't have to deal with all this crap that's in my life anymore. I can just escape from all of it. And then I have a missing piece in my memory. I don't know what happened. I woke up in the back of a girlfriend's car, and she like has her arm around me, and she's crying, and I don't remember much of that. And then it's like 6:30 in the morning, and it's like she has to go to school, and so like they drive me back to my house. I go upstairs, and I get in bed, and I go to sleep, and I think like, man, like it's done. I'm gonna finally die. This is the moment. And it didn't work, right? So I woke up the next morning, and I was so pissed. I've probably been that mad again since then, but maybe not. Like, I was not a happy camper. And it's so funny, like, I was really, really mad, but it's like, who can you be mad at in that situation? And truthfully, I was mad at God because I knew that he was the reason I was still alive. I couldn't fight it anymore. I knew that God was up to something. And then he brought this verse to my mind, and it was a verse I totally knew for years, and it just never like hit me. Like it was all up here, it was all in my head, but it wasn't really in my heart. And the verse was Jeremiah 29:11. I think the guys have it loaded up. Yeah, for I know I'm going to do a different translation. It says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." And guys, I want each one of you to know that that's the answer to those questions that I asked at the beginning. To the question of who are you and what are you doing here, you can't answer it. And that's kind of a relief because God already answered it. He already knows who he's made you to be and what he's made you to do. And for you guys who aren't walking in that yet, you know that it's a bit painful to not know who you are and to not know why you're here. But you see, when Jesus came and walked the earth, and then ultimately died on the cross and rose again, he took care of it. Not only did he take care of sin and death, but he took care of defining who you are and what your purpose is here. Some of you guys are like me. Some of you guys are broken. Some of you guys have heavy burdens, and you walk around every day with this cloud over you. Some of you guys are depressed, you're anxious. Some of you guys are turning to self-harm, to cutting. Some of you guys are going the route of drugs and drinking and partying and doing whatever people want you to do just so that someone will care about you. But guys, in the end, it's all destructive. It all tears you apart on the inside, and you know that because you don't feel any better. I know because I got into the self-harming too. After you cut yourself, you're not okay, I'm good. I did it. No, you keep doing it. It's an addiction. It's just like drugs. It's just like alcohol. It's the same thing. And you guys, I know all of you are living with that sort of stuff. Man, even I would have fully called myself a Christian, a believer in Jesus throughout all those years, but I still wasn't living it. So man, even the people that know Jesus in here, but aren't letting him define who you are, sometimes you just need to cast your burdens on Jesus. And last week, Chris ended by doing the cardboard testimonies, and I thought that was such a powerful moment. And I was like, dude, I wish I could do one of those. I wish we could all do one of those, because we all have a testimony. We all have a story of God at work in our life. So right now, Chris is gonna lay out some cards and some pens up at the front. And while the music is going, I'd love for you guys to have the opportunity to just come forward, grab a card, grab a pen, come up with a friend if you're too scared. I wouldn't have come up. I would have been way too scared. So grab a friend, come up to the front, and whatever that thing is, whatever that label is that people have put on you or you've put on yourself, whatever's in your past that you're defining yourself by, mistakes, burdens, things that you've done, things that have been done to you, whatever that thing is, write it down. Maybe it's a whole list of things. Maybe it's just one big thing that just is burning on your heart right now. But take a minute, write it down on a card. And then I just want you guys to spend a moment with God and think about that thing on that card and realize that God doesn't define you by that, whatever that thing is. God sees that. And he's yeah, dude, but I took care of that on the cross. And all you have to do is accept that. It's grace, it's a free gift. And so that's what I did. I heard Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you. And I said, all right, I give in. I don't have anything to offer you, God, but if you can make something out of this, then go for it. So come on down. Don't be shy. I want to give you guys an opportunity to write down whatever that thing is. Nobody's going to look at it. It's between you and God. Write it down on a card and then tear it up. In the name of Jesus, you can tear that thing up, stomp it on the ground, throw it in the trash can. Because at the cross, that was taken care of. It's dead, it's done, it's over. So I want to offer you guys that chance to come forward. I'll go first.